Welcome to the Aravosis Report. Hello, everybody. John Aravosis here to talk to you about Ukraine and the latest news. Probably a decent amount tonight talking again about the the rocket, whatever it was that landed in Poland. Just do another, as always, maybe just you guys start with a quick little hello from where you are, and then I'll start TikTok in a second. But TikTok lately has been like, boom, everyone arrives at once. So I now have them wait a second because otherwise it launches way too quickly. But do your quick little introductions, maybe yourselves. And then, as I said, I'll start TikTok and then explain the show. Actually, we'll start it now, explain the show and how it works, and we'll go from here. Hang on here. There's TikTok launching, mirror, boom, boom. Get my map ready to go. Boop, boop, boop. There. Hey, Tom Keene. You're the first TikToker to join us. Welcome. We'll wait half a minute for a good audience to show up, and then we will start. Hey, Ashley. Rowan. Anyway, welcome, everybody. Good. As I said, as always, we'll wait. I always like to wait a minute until the TikTok numbers get to a critical mass, and then we start. So welcome all. It's Wednesday, November 16th. My lights are a little low today because I have a migraine and I never get migraines. Oof, I went to the doctor today and it hurt a little bit. He was doing stuff around my head and it hurt. It gave me a migraine and I don't get migraines. Like, I'm so glad I don't because, oh my God, I don't know how people live with these things. Anyway, so yes, we're going to start in a second. Actually, I'll do my introductions. Thank you, Harold, right there. So hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. This is my nightly show where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine. And tonight, we're going to talk about this issue with this rocket or missile hitting Poland. Still some contradictions going on as to what's really going on. So I want to kind of delve into that a little bit, why it matters, and a couple other little Ukraine stories. The way the show works is I'll talk to you guys for the next 20 to 30 minutes or so about the latest news from Ukraine. Sometimes we have a back and forth as I'm giving you the news. Other times I give you the news first and then we just do a question and answer. Either way, thank you, Sig Sauer, for the hat. Otherwise, what I will recommend for you guys on TikTok to do is if you've got questions, you can even submit them now. I won't get to them for a while, but you can go to my profile, look for the Q&A link and submit questions there. And for the rest of you guys, you know to use the comment box and there you go. Final little point is the best way you guys can help me with my work, independent journalism that it is to follow me on TikTok, follow me on YouTube, subscribe. And secondly, as you're already seeing on TikTok, what you guys see, the gifts are very helpful because the gifts actually put money in the pocket of the creator. So thank you for your gifts on TikTok. Thank you for the super chat here. And let me dive right in. So thank you, Inspired Woman. So very weird news day as far as this issue with these rockets or missiles that apparently landed on Poland. It's a little strange. And I say this because NATO came out today and was pretty definitive. The NATO Secretary General, the Poles, the United States, saying that it appears, not definitively, but it appears to be that this was a Ukrainian rocket. Ukrainian rocket meant to shoot down a Russian rocket, and it landed in Poland. The Ukrainians are saying, no way. Zelensky literally said he has no doubt that this was not a Ukrainian missile. So, it kind of opens up the question of what is, what's going on here. Let me give you just a little more of the details. So President Duda of Poland said that there is no evidence that it was launched from Russia. Okay. The Polish Prime Minister, Morawiecki, that's my guess, said, but he adds, listen to this. So Duda, the president, says there's no evidence it was launched by Russia. The Polish Prime Minister says we cannot rule out that the shelling of Ukrainian infrastructure near the border was an intentional provocation done in the hope that such a situation would arise. Now, what I think he's getting at there, he's not saying, this is the Polish Prime Minister now, he's not saying that the missile necessarily came from came from Russia, but he's saying that it is possible that Russia has been intentionally hitting Ukrainian targets near the Polish border in the hopes that something like this would happen. in the hopes that the Ukrainians would fire a rocket to stop the Russian rocket, air defense, and that it would fall within Poland and cause a crisis. Okay. Now, let me kind of go on with this. There's a team of Polish prosecutors examining the remains of what they say is an S-300 missile recovered from the scene on Wednesday. The Poles are investigating this with the Americans. The Americans are helping them as well. Now, the S-300 is interesting because guess what? Both Russia and Ukraine both use the S-300. Now, Ukraine uses it as an air defense weapon, surface to air. So it goes from the ground and it's meant to hit air targets. So it could be used, thank you, Og Cambrai. It can be used to knock planes out of the sky. It can be used to knock rockets out of the sky in this case, and possibly drones as well, I would think. Well, the thing is, the Russians have been using this. Now, any of you guys who have followed my show before might remember a few months ago we were talking about this. The Russians use the S-300, which is a surface-to-air missile, air defense. They use it as just a rocket, as a missile. They use it to hit ground targets. Now, because the Russians are launching a terror campaign and have launched a terror campaign against Ukrainian civilians, they don't really care where the rocket hits. They're willing to launch these things into Ukrainian cities just to cause terror. So again, both the Russians use it and the Ukrainians use it. So you're still kind of going, okay, right? Could it be both? Well, let me throw in one more thing here, and then I'll give you another detail that actually makes me think maybe it isn't the Russians. What we still need to find out is, have the Poles found anything else beyond this S-300? For example, was there a different kind of rocket? Now, the Ukrainians, by the way, an added little point today that the Ukrainians added, that the Ukrainians said that, yes, we did fire some rockets, some S-300s in that area because the Russians had launched a missile strike in the area. So one of the things I'm still wondering about is, even if this rocket was Ukrainian, was there a Russian rocket that also passed into Polish territory? Now, one thing that was really interesting, and I literally just saw this before coming on the show with you guys. I mean, I'm talking like 5 minutes before coming on. The Ukrainians came out and said that their S-300 rockets, the rocket that Poland says it looks like they found there, that the S-300s the Ukrainians use to knock down missiles out of the sky are programmed so that if they go off target, they self-destruct. So a Ukrainian missile should not have landed in Poland. It should have blown up in the air. Now, what we saw from the images from Poland were a huge crater in the ground. So this appears to be, a rocket that landed in the ground and then blew up. Again, lots of mystery going on as to whose rocket this is. Now, one point I'm going to show you really quick, and then I'll do a quick reset just to explain to folks again kind of who I am and what we're doing here. The S-300 rocket that, again, the Ukrainians use for surface-to-air defense to knock rockets out of the sky, to knock drones out of the sky, and the Russians have been using it as an actual missile. So the Russians are using it as a missile you shoot from the ground, and you go after ground targets, like in the Russians' case, going after Ukrainian civilian apartment buildings, things like that. Well, the range of these rockets, the S-300s, only go up to 120 miles away. Now, I went on Google and I decided to do a quick search of what range is 120 miles. 120 miles is going to be, help me out here, guys, 160 kilometers, 150 kilometers? No, 120 miles is going to be 200 kilometers. Yes, because 60 miles is 100 kilometers. 120 miles is going to be 200 kilometers for you non-Americans out there. And I went online and I found an app that showed me what is 120 miles or 200 kilometers away from the target, the city that was hit. Here is what you get. And hold on, I'm going to actually put my phone light even a little stronger. What you're going to see in this map is that this target only hits, what you are seeing is 120 miles away from the hit point, the impact point in Poland. Okay, I'm showing you guys 120 miles away. What that shows us where the rocket could have come from, anywhere in the red circle. Now, the problem you've got is what that shows us is pretty much Ukraine or Belarus. I mean, or it came from, Slovakia. No one thinks it came from Slovakia or Poland, but Ukraine or Belarus. Now, it's a little hard to tell on the map I've got for you guys here, but there is a sort of peninsula almost pointing down, not a peninsula, but a jagged point coming down from Belarus. That is actually, you can't really see it on my map here, but it is possible that this missile came from Belarus. But in Belarus, let me just explain who Belarus is, okay? Belarus is up here. Here's Ukraine. Here's the town of Lviv. This little jagged indent here is pretty much where, I'll go right over here a little bit. More or less the tip of my finger in the blue area is where the rocket hit, okay, where the missile landed. Now, Belarus up here is a Russian ally run by a dictator named Lukashenko. They've been helping the Russians with the war. They have not actually invaded Ukraine, but they've let the Russians come in and fire artillery. I'm not sure about rockets, but they've let the Russians basically use Belarus to attack Ukraine. So the final point here is it depends on the trajectory and what the radar shows. If the radar shows, and I'll show you again, okay, on my map here, this is where the target landed. This is where it landed. This is where it would have to come from. So up here is where it would have to come from if it was Belarus, coming down here. Otherwise, the circle it hits would have been Ukraine. Okay, it would have to start in Ukraine or Belarus. If the trajectory from the radar is showing anything other than coming from here, then you'd think it would have to be from Ukraine. Now, let me throw in one final point. I think it is not final point. We'll talk a little bit more. I think it's incredibly interesting that the Ukrainians are being so adamant, because if the Ukrainians, actually, let me reset a little bit. I'm going to just tell you guys kind of who I am again real quick, because I know we got more new people from TikTok. I'm John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. This is my nightly show, in which I talk about the latest news from Ukraine. Tonight's show, thank you, Ellen. Tonight's show, I wanted to devote a good portion to talking about this issue of this rocket that landed, a Russian-made, Soviet-made rocket that landed in Poland, and this debate that we are having as to where it came from. Okay, the Russians are saying it wasn't them. The Poles and NATO and the U.S., NATO includes the U.S. and Poland, but Polish government separately, U.S. government separately, NATO Secretary General, all of them are saying it looks like it came from Ukraine, but they still need to finish their investigation. And the Ukrainians are saying, no way. Now, let me I'll tell you really quick too. As always, I'm independent media. The best way you guys can help me out, please follow me on TikTok right now. Click that little follow button right now. Follow me on subscribe on YouTube and everywhere else. And please keep the gifts coming. The gifts on TikTok, the gifts on with the super chats and everything else help support my work. And I really appreciate it, guys, because I'm doing this for free. And literally, it's what I get from you guys. I do like to see when you guys click the follow. It's nice. It's nice to see all those follows scroll across the screen. And thank you, by the way, Chris and Hector, for those as well. And not the Millie and Debbie and Maharet. Let me read you the quote from Zelensky denying this, okay? Zelensky says he has no doubt that the missile was not Ukrainian. Now, he says, I have no doubt that it was not our missile. Now, he throws in, oh, thank you, Dyke. Now, that's a nice one. I know that's a nice one. Thank you for that. That was very generous of you. And very cool, too, because I like all the sci-fi and astronomy stuff are my two of my big thrills. In addition to dinosaurs, I do like my dinosaurs too. Listen to the rest of this quote, though. So Zelensky says, I have no doubt that it was not our missile. Then he adds, I want us to be fair. And if it was the use of our air defense, then I want that evidence. Now, what's interesting there, hey, military, thank you for that. What's interesting there is Zelensky is saying he has no doubt that it was not from Ukraine. But then he throws in and says, but if you're able to prove it, I want to see the evidence. That means, in my mind, it means Zelensky is leaving a little bit of a room for doubt. Now, what I find a little strange with all of this, I find it a little weird that the Ukrainians would simply, thank you, LL Cool J, that the Ukrainians and Louis, that the Ukrainians would simply say definitively, it's not us. Why would Zelensky say that if it weren't true, right? Zelensky's not going to lie. First of all, I trust Zelensky more than I do the Russians. I mean, Zelensky, the Russians have lied to us from the beginning, right? And the Russians do lie about these kind of things all the time. Zelensky, the Ukrainians have not lied to us. We have not caught. I mean, if you think about it, right? Sure. I mean, we all know the Ukrainians are probably exaggerating some of their statistics, right? The number of troops they kill or something. Sure. But I challenge anybody out there to find an outright lie from the Ukrainians. I mean, maybe there's something out there. I can't think of one. Whereas from the Russians, thank you for the origami there, paper crane, Jesse. There's lots. So why would Zelensky lie about this? Is my question. I can't figure it out. Now, one possibility is, I think you have to accept that Zelensky's telling the truth. Now, keep in mind, the truth doesn't mean you're right. And what I mean by that is remember how like little kids, any of you guys who have had little kids, I mean, I've seen it with my nieces and nephews, when you're the parent and you tell the kid something and you mean it earnestly, like, yes, later we'll go for ice cream. And then later something happens and you can't go for ice cream. And the kid says you lied, right? Well, you didn't lie because you did intend to go for ice cream. So my point here is, I don't think Zelensky's lying. It is possible Zelensky is incorrect, but then how is he getting incorrect information, right? Is his military screwing up and not knowing that their rocket was in the area? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. And the Ukrainians know, thank you, Annie. We love our whales. Thank you. We'll do the wave. And for all of you on YouTube, my mom was watching last night, by the way, I found out today, and mom was like, it was kind of strange you were thanking everybody, but I got used to it. I was like, well, if you're on TikTok, you'd see all the funky stuff and you'd know why I thank people. So, and the rest of you on YouTube, I think have just gotten used to it. But as I said, it's a little weird. It's a little weird what's going on. Let me find a little bit more of this. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention too, if you like my work, in addition to following me, and please do follow me on this, do check out my Patreon and all the other ways you guys can help support my work. You can go to my link tree, which is actually, it's in my profile on TikTok. Just go to the profile link, but you can also just type in aravosis.com, my last name.com. And for all the rest of you, you'll find all my links there, my Patreon, my store, Discord, all sorts of cool stuff. But if you guys can help out the Patreon in particular, if you can give $5 a month just to support my work, I'd appreciate it. Let me find out what else we got here. So Ukraine's, this was I was telling you earlier, Ukraine's military has informed the U.S. and its allies that it tried to intercept a Russian missile near and during the time frame of the missile strike in Poland. That's interesting too. I'm going to kind of let this one go with this. I've got a few more news stories I want to tell you about Ukraine, what's going on with the war, and then we'll go to the question and answer. But as I said, and I want us to get into kind of a big discussion on this because I'm really curious on your guys' feedback on this because I've worked in politics for over 30 years, okay? I had my first political job working in the U.S. Senate back in 1989. Yes, I'm that old. And when things don't make sense, it means there's something else going on that we don't know about, so to speak. And it doesn't make sense to me that Zelensky but when I say politics, it's not about politics. Somebody's saying skip the politics. It's not about that. The point is, we are looking at politics means a couple different things, by the way. Politics can mean election politics. Politics can also mean simply the operation of a government, of political players, of government agencies, of the presidency, of the prime minister, of the legislature. That's also politics. That's what I'm talking about. And it doesn't make sense to me, like I said, why NATO, the Poles, America, NATO Secretary General have all said it looks like it's not Russia and it looks like it's Ukraine. And the Ukrainians so far are being very adamant saying we didn't do it. It wasn't us. Because in the end, if the Ukrainians thought it was them, they would just admit it, right? I mean, look, let me put it this way, right? If it was the Ukrainians, and let's say whole secret plan here, right? Thank you, Inspired. The Ukrainians know it was them. Why would they lie about it? Because you're going to find the remains of the rocket in Poland. you're going to eventually get some kind of radar or satellite imagery or something that is going to show this thing coming from Ukraine. So you're going to get caught. Why would the Ukrainians lie about it, knowing that they are relying on NATO for really helping keep them alive at this point in terms of the weaponry that we are providing them and the economic aid we're also providing to help keep the government afloat, because obviously it's kind of hard to collect taxes right now when half the country is, internally displaced. So that's all I'm saying. I am not yet convinced it's Russia. I'm not yet convinced it's not Ukraine, but I think it's very strange that Ukraine is being so adamant, and I trust Ukraine enough that there's at least a portion of my brain that says, let's wait and see what else comes up. And maybe it will end up being Ukraine in the end. It may be. Again, I'm not going to deny it either, because I'm not going to be stupid about this. Thank you, Loyalty, for that. Another kind of related story here, and this is actually really dangerous here. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs in America is General Milley. Now, thank you, Sam, for the cat's paw there. General Milley is America's top uniformed military official. And I've explained this before, that the head of our military, the head of the Pentagon, is the Secretary of Defense. That is a civilian. And I'd be curious how this works in all the other NATO countries. I'm assuming in all the NATO countries, it's always a civilian. Typically in a democracy, you want a civilian, well, at least in America's democracy, you want a civilian running the military to show that it has civilian control, democratic control of the military. But the top military official, the top uniformed military official, is called the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in America, the top general of our military. Well, our top general is General Milley. He said today that he tried to reach out and speak with his Russian counterpart. Oh, no, excuse me, stop. I just reread what I was going to say. Yesterday, as this crisis was breaking, okay, General Milley calls Moscow and tries to get his counterpart in the Russian military on the phone, General Gerasimov, who I believe, what do they call it? I know what it's called in Russia. It's bothering me what it's called. The actual, if anybody can remember, I'm curious. If you can write it down, I'll mention it. But what the actual, he's a general, but what the actual position is called in Russia. It's not ours is chairman of the Joint Chiefs. It's something staff, I think, in Russia. I actually got to meet one of them once years ago when I was on the Hill, the big scary one. No, the name of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, what it's called over there. In any case, our guy tried to reach out to their guy yesterday. In the chief of the general staff. There you go. Thank you, Jonathan. Our guy tried to reach out to their guy. Our top military guy tried to reach out to their top general. Our top general, their top general yesterday in the middle of this crisis. He wouldn't take the call. He wouldn't take the call from our top general. That is dangerous as hell. I mean, that is the opposite of the way this should work. And it's unfortunate because it really goes to this overall issue of just how dangerous Russia is in the way they approach these things. You know, the whole reason for there to be a line of communication between our top generals is exactly this, right? Yesterday, we were in a situation where we thought a Russian missile had landed and actually not just landed, had blown up in a NATO country and killed 2 NATO citizens. And we were trying to figure out if the Russians did this on purpose, if Russia attacked a NATO country on purpose, and if, in other words, if Russia declared war on NATO. We were trying to figure that out, right? Thank you, Chaz. And the Russians wouldn't get on the phone to basically talk to our guy and go, you know what? Wasn't us. We're happy to give you, our radar, blah, 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 to help prove it, but it wasn't us. When you don't get on the phone, it signifies that you're guilty. Now, I'm not saying the Russians are guilty, but when you are dealing with a military crisis, when you're dealing with NATO, trying to figure out if the Russians did just declare war on NATO, if they're not willing to get on the phone, it makes it look all the more like the Russians are guilty. And that's how you can have problems happen militarily. So just goes again to show you how just screwed up it is. I mean, in terms of the way the Russians run their government and the military. Now, I'll do a quick little reset again, and then just a couple other news stories, and then we'll do the question and answer. I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. This is my nightly show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., where I talk about the latest news from Ukraine, go over the news of the day, basically what happened today since last night, tell you what I think matters, my background. You can go to my link tree. It's in my profile on TikTok or aravosis.com, and you can find my LinkedIn there. But basically, my background is law degree, Masters of International Relations at Georgetown. I worked in the U.S. Senate. I worked at the United Nations. I've worked at the World Bank. I worked on arms control issues. I've got a very long-standing background in foreign policy issues and in public policy and in government and journalism as well. And my goal here is to basically, in all the broadcasts I've been doing, is using my public policy background and hopefully my understanding of these issues to try to explain them better, but also to tell you guys what matters, to basically help cut through the news. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. Welcome. Please do follow me on TikTok. Please do subscribe on YouTube, and keep the gifts coming. And we've also got a store. Again, go to aravosis.com, which is my link. You can see the link in my profile. Just go to the profile link in TikTok, and you can go to my store. I've got a store of Ukrainian-themed goods as well, which is kind of cool. Check it out. So President Zelensky said today, that Western countries had given him signals that Russian President Putin had sought direct talks with Ukraine. Now, little weird. I mean, maybe that's true. Thank you, Al, for the heart. Maybe that's true. At the same time, why would the Russians say it privately? And why would they go to NATO? Unless, now, mind you, what the Russians could have done, the Russians could have gone to China, for example, and China, right? Biden met with China. Biden met with Xi, the Chinese premier, just a couple of days ago in Indonesia. So it's possible that Biden and Xi talked, and Xi passed along, hey, the Russians want to talk. Maybe. I'm not convinced the Russians are hurting enough yet, to be honest. I mean, things are going very poorly. Things are going very poorly for thank you, Melanie, I think, for the falling gold. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I know that was very generous of you, by the way. Thank you. But it's any case, Zelensky says that he was told the Russians want to talk. Another quote from General Milley. Let me give you this one too. So this is another quote from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who is America's top uniformed military official, America's top general, would be a good way of putting it. Okay, listen to this. The probability of a Ukrainian military victory, defined as kicking the Russians out of all of Ukraine, including Crimea, the probability of that happening anytime soon is not high militarily. Politically, there may be a political solution where politically the Russians withdraw. That's possible. He added, saying Russia right now is on its back. Now, that is also interesting to me, okay? And let me tell you why. I think it's true that Ukraine is not getting all of its land back anytime soon, right? It's not happening in the next 6 months, I don't think. Next year or two, maybe. Are the Russians in trouble? Absolutely. And Milley says that. So I don't think the general is necessarily wrong. Okay. I don't think, now mind you, he has said previously that he doesn't think the Ukrainians can win, period. He thinks neither side can win. I think that's wrong. I think, and I'm not, this is, it's funny, on the internet, the kids, the new phrase the kids use on the internet, which makes me kind of laugh, is hopium. And it's like hope, and hope as a drug, basically hopium. And hopium is basically wishing for things that are never going to happen, and you would call that hopium. I don't think it's hopium saying that Ukraine could win this war, but I think it will take a long time to happen. It could take several years. Okay, but the Ukrainians have surprised us. They've surprised us a lot. To date, one of the figures that's been used is, to date, the Ukrainians have won back 50% of the land the Russians took from them. Now, you got to remember, okay, that includes the Russians invaded, and the Russians took a lot of land here north of Kyiv, right, all around here, around Kharkiv, all the way here, this, and they already had this. Well, what happens? At the end of March or so, the Ukrainians pushed back and pushed the Russians, all the Russian up here, the Russians went back to Russia. All the Russians here, the Ukrainians about 2 or 3 months ago pushed the Russians out of here. So now the Russians are pretty much here and here. Now, they still control 18% of Ukrainian territory, which is not small, right? That's almost 1/5 of Ukraine. Thank you, Cœur de blah, blah, blah. I couldn't see the rest of your name. Oh, Cœur de Lion. That's cute. Thank you for the fireworks. So it's still a lot of Ukraine the Russians have, but half of the territory, well, that's what I'm going to explain this again. 18 to 20% is what the Russians still control. But of the total amount of Ukraine that the Russians did control, the Russians have already lost half of the territory they controlled. That's a lot. I mean, that's a heck of a lot, and it suggests that the Ukrainians could keep going. What I was going to say here, sorry, Elise, I do see your question. I'll get to it in a second. I was going to add one more point about what Millie said here. Hang on, I'm going to look at it again. So he's saying okay, here's what I was going to tell you. And this is, again, where politics comes into play. Millie is our top general. I have seen him speak. He's very careful about what he says. This man it reminds me of the British when they sort of educated British people, and how it's almost as if there isn't a word that they didn't intend to say, from the big college, from the big universities. He says the probability of Ukraine getting its territory back militarily is not high. He says politically, there may be a political solution. He's now saying it twice, a political solution where politically, third time he says it in a sentence, the Russians withdraw. That's possible. Russia right now is on its back. Put that together with what Zelensky had said earlier. I read you guys the quote, or at least this story, that Zelensky had heard, thank you, Chaz, that the Russians wanted to talk. I think General Milley, I'm not sure he's right, but I think General Milley is saying that he has heard that the Russians want to talk. The Russians want to find a way to end this war. Now, how that ends up happening, we've talked about this before, whether Ukraine gets all of its territory back, whether Ukraine has to give up Crimea, and I don't think the Ukrainians would give up Crimea. Crimea, by the way, is the Ukrainian territory here in the south. The Russians stole it when they invaded in 2014. One of the points the Ukrainians are always telling us, and it's a good point, is the rest of the world thinks this war started in February. The war did not start in February when Russia invaded over here and took all of this land. The war started in 2014 when Russia invaded, stole Crimea, and also started to quasi-occupy two of the regions in Ukraine's east. That's when it all started. So I don't know. Just keep an eye on this. I think it's very interesting that Milley jumped in and said he thought there was a political solution. The question is, and final point here. General Milley is not stupid. He knows that Ukraine is not willing to give up much, if any, of its territory. So what kind of a political solution could there be, right? I mean, the only political solution I could see, and I still don't think the Ukrainians would do it. And by the way, I'm not saying this is a good idea, but I think at best, the Russians would not want to do anything that puts them, let me rephrase this. The Russians would want to go back to where we were before the war started in February. In other words, the Russians would go back to giving up this territory, but keeping Crimea. The problem is, how do you do that? Because I don't think the Ukrainians would do it. Anyway, let me go on here. A couple more little stories, and then we'll get. Czech Republic has announced it is going to train 4,000 Ukrainian troops in 2023. The Red Cross, the Ukrainians have been upset at the Red Cross for a while now. Thank you, Stephen. But this, well, let me throw this at you. I'm actually curious if anybody from Ukraine is on with us right now. Let me read this story to you and tell me, is this significant or is this ridiculous? And let me tell you this. Hold on, another sip of water, and I'm going to tell you this. There we go. I see Kapitan is from Ukraine. Perfect. So Kapitan, among other Ukrainians we have today. Let me read you this and tell me, is this a lot of money or is this nothing? Okay. Oh, I see a couple of you. We got several Ukrainians. Good. Listen to this. The Red Cross will provide 100 million hryvnia, which is the Ukrainian currency, equal to $2.7 million. And by the way, the euro and the dollar are pretty close. So let's say 2.7 million euros, $2.7 million to help people living in recently liberated parts of Kherson Oblast. Kherson is the region in the south here that the Ukrainians just liberated, this northern portion north of the river, okay, including Kherson City, okay? So the Ukrainians have liberated that area. The Red Cross says they will provide almost $3 million to residents living in the Kherson Oblast at the time of liberation. Now, listen to the amount of money they're giving each of these people. They're going to give each of these residents 1,200 hryvnia, or $33, 33 euros. Now, obviously, the standard of living, or I should say the cost of living, is much more here in America. Okay, fair enough. But in Ukraine, is that anything? I mean, 1,200 hryvnia? It sounds like nothing. You know? Okay, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, I mean, it kind of, because it's like the Red Cross almost found themselves in a position where they were doing something good, and you hear the amount of money and go, yay, almost $3 million, yay. And it literally breaks down to each resident getting 1,200 hryvnia, or $33. Okay, the Ukrainians agree then. It sounds insulting to me. I mean, for example, I know that because we've been helping buy supplies and things, right? We've been raising money for humanitarian aid in Ukraine. One of the things we've done is we've raised almost $80,000 now US that we have provided for humanitarian aid in Ukraine from you guys, by the way. Thank you, all of you. And we, for example, bought these stoves. I think you guys call them rocket stoves. Basically, these little stoves that you put wood in, and they can be used to cook food outside in the winter because the Ukrainians don't have electricity and gas for the winter, okay? These stoves were costing us, I believe, $37 each, okay? Just for one of these little itty bitty stoves. I mean, this stuff, a car. We bought some cars for the Ukrainian, some used cars for the Ukrainian humanitarian aid group Harkov Mir, that basically delivers meals to people who can't get food. And the cars cost us, we got 2 used cars that were in good, decent condition. They cost us 4,000 euros a car, $4,000 a car. Now, when you think of that being the cost of living in that area, right? If you're talking $4,000 for a good car, but a used car, if you're talking $37 for this little metal stove, and mind you, when I say a stove, I mean it's metal. It's empty metal that you put wood in and you fire it. $33 doesn't sound like much to me. Just anyway, I'm not glad. I'm glad you guys agree with me. I'm not glad because then it sounds like the Ukrainians aren't getting much, but it just seemed really obnoxious to me. Okay. All right, that's it for the news, but do not leave because now we do the question and answer period and the discussion period. One of the things I will say is, even if you guys don't have questions, what I like to do is also, since we're going to talk about, let's get to this issue that we started the show about, talking about this Polish missile that came down in Poland, whether it was Ukrainian, whether it was Russian. And even if you don't have questions, one of the things I find interesting sometimes is for you guys just to weigh in with your thoughts. Like you don't have to have a question. You can have an opinion, because I'm still trying to figure out. And actually, Elise, sorry, I'm forgetting poor Elise. Elise did have a question early on, but if you've got a thought on it too, I'm happy to just hear what people think. Elise says, serious question. What can the meaning / goal of any negotiations be with Russia? Thank you, Jen. Of any negotiations with Russia be with their history of outright lies and deception. Yes. One of the famous quotes from Ronald Reagan in the 1980s when he was president, he was a very conservative American president, okay, a Republican. And Reagan was negotiating nuclear arms control with the Russians. And he really negotiated some, groundbreaking agreements, actually, with Mikhail Gorbachev. Very good arms control agreements, really. And Reagan's quote, and I never can say it correctly, but it was translated into English as being trust but verify. And it's a Russian quote, which means, yeah, I trust you, but I still want proof. Which means, I'm laughing, which means I don't trust you, pretty much, right? And I'm with you, Elise. I think one of the things that really worries me isn't even a matter of trusting the Russians or whatever. In the end, I think Russia is going to invade again. Russia wants all of Ukraine, right? They want all of Ukraine. We know this. Putin wants Odessa, Odessa, big city in the south, very famous. Odessa's over here, hard to see on my map. Historically, very famous historical city. The Russians want it. The Russians want all of the south. They don't want to lose this, by the way. They don't want to lose this land that they took because they wanted a land bridge. Russia's over here. They wanted a land connection to Crimea, which they stole here. The Russians, do not believe that Ukraine is a real country. They think Ukraine is a fabrication. It's not a real country, and it should be part of Russia. So the problem is, walk softly and carry a big stick. Exactly. That's what we'd say in English. The problem you get with this is, what possible commitment can you give that Russia's not going to attack again? I think the only, and I've talked about this before, the only way you can guarantee that Russia's not going to attack again is putting NATO troops on the ground in Ukraine. It's the only way. It's the only way. It's the only way. Now, whether they're NATO peacekeepers, I don't think there's any chance of NATO accepting Ukraine as a member anytime soon, so that's not going to happen. But NATO would have to have troops on the ground in Ukraine, peacekeepers, that if the Russians were to invade, if the Russians were to bomb, they would be bombing NATO troops, so there would be all-out war. That's the only solution I can see. And the thing is, would NATO really be willing to do that? I'm not sure they would. But short of that, anything short of that, and I think the Russians are going to invade again. And if I were Ukraine, I'd say, no way. Let me see. We got a second. Drew. Hey, Drew. When will Ukraine start seeing the Iranian missiles that Russia bought? Yeah, that's a good question, actually. Didn't they say 2 weeks? 2 weeks ago? Thanks for all you do. Thank you, Drew. I appreciate you, Drew, too. I'm recognizing your name already. You've already had a few questions. I appreciate that, Drew, over the last couple of weeks. There was U.S. reported that the Russians went to Ukraine and bought more of these kamikaze drones, the drones that have a bomb in front and they attack and blow up. And the Ukrainians have been using, the Russians have been using them to attack the Ukrainian infrastructure, right? So that's been happening. The Russians also bought a lot of missiles, and I believe they were surface-to-surface missiles. And there was a lot of concern because these missiles could go a long distance. We've not heard anything about them being used yet. Now, the situation is, A, the missiles have to arrive. B, the Russians would have to be trained in how to use them, depending, do they have their own launchers? Could they be launched otherwise? I don't know. Thank you, Roshin. Yep, I see. I've got it. I don't know. Oh, I see, Lori. I thought that was I see. Lori gave the $2, but it was actually, she had a question attached to it. Or yeah, that was, okay, Lori. I didn't realize that's what you were saying. Thanks, Roshin. Could the explosion of the grain silo account for the crater? Oh, I see. Just to change topics. So Lori's asking about the fact that in Poland, okay, and again, just to kind of show you because I think it's kind of cool. So this missile hit here in Poland, okay, right across the Ukrainian border. It caused a really huge crater. Now, Lori is saying, could the crater have been caused by the fact that there was an explosion at the grain site? You know, it's kind of funny, actually. At first, I was like, grain? Why would grain explode? But grain potentially, okay, Mike, I'll shout you out. Hello, Mike, on TikTok. Potentially, grain could be a lot of powder, and powder ignites. So I don't know. Let me see here. Explosive matter being intercepted going from Iran to Russia in fishing vessels. Now, that would be pretty amazing. WC Fields is saying that we would have. And grain is flammable. Grain is very explosive, especially in a silo. Okay, there you go. That I was going to say because of the powder, I'm assuming because of the powderness of it, right? Is that why? Grain explodes. Okay, there you go, Lori. I was kind of sitting here going, why would Lori think grain would explode? Grain dust. You know, maybe it's totally possible. I mean, who knows, right? Who knows? But that's interesting. Yeah, no, I hadn't thought of that. Danielle. Hello, Danielle. Do you figure the missile was a page out of Soviet military doctrine, escalate to de-escalate? Up, JSS. Oh, hey, JSS. Thank you for the whale. Boo, wave. We got another whale on TikTok. Thank you, good sir. Your ongoing generosity means a lot to me. Thank you. You've been very generous lately. Thank you. So Daniel is saying escalate to de-escalate. The whether this missile attack in Poland was real, create the environment for the situation to spiral. So this whole thing, thank you, Kathy. This whole thing, the Russians have this doctrine of escalate to de-escalate. I have to say, I've never fully understood how it works. I understand the basic concept, and this concept is that. Sorry, that was my cough. I have a cough that sounds like a sneeze, but thank you for saying bless you anyway. Just my asthma is bothering me a little tonight. My heat went on, and I think it's bothering me a little. And actually, you know what? Somebody give me an example of escalating to de-escalate. Could somebody give me an example of that? Because I'd be curious. It's something that I don't quite understand the doctrine. Now, I could give you an example of how it might apply here in Ukraine. Okay. For example, the Russians, accidentally shoot a missile into Poland. That's escalation, right? Russia hitting a NATO ally. Oh my God, that could be war. But it creates such panic and such concern. And I talked about this yesterday, actually. It creates such concern that NATO comes together and privately says, we can't let this war go on. It's too dangerous. As this missile strike in Poland shows, we could have had war yesterday with Russia had things gotten out of control, right? So Russia escalates by attacking Poland and says it was a mistake, which allows them to de-escalate the crisis. Because now you put more pressure on NATO to say, oh, you're right. We've got to put pressure on Ukraine to make this all go away. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, Daniel, if that's kind of the thing you're talking about. Cuba was possibly escalate to de-escalate. Yee. Oh, see, I wouldn't think that with Cuba. I wouldn't think that. Thank you, Bonnie. That is the one. Oh, I see. I guess that is supposed to be America, the U.S., the world. I always thought that the gift, Bonnie, by the way, I always thought that was like an exoplanet or something. You know what I mean? I never thought of it as being the world where you could see the moon. But anyway, that was very pretty. Thank you. Yeah, maybe Cuba, but I don't see, meaning the Cuban Missile Crisis. I don't really think. I think Cuban Missile Crisis was quite literally a game of chicken. We are not going to allow that. We're talking the early 1960s here, 1962, I think. We are not going to allow you to put nuclear missiles in Cuba, ICBMs, or we are going to have war. And we're willing to have war over it unless you take the missiles out. I don't know that that's escalate to de-escalate. Maybe it is. But I also feel like that's kind of like, no, there's a red line that you've crossed and it's worth going to a war to stop you. That's a little different. Hello, Maggie in Poland. We've been talking about you a lot today. Danny, you potentially UN peacekeepers. I guess the concern I've got about UN peacekeepers. So Danny's asking about what about UN peacekeepers and whether they could be used to try to to try to enforce the peace, right? Let's say Ukraine and Russia reach a peace deal. I don't know what they do about the land. They reach some deal they both agree to with regards to the land they both control. And you use NATO peacekeepers to ensure the Russians don't invade. Maybe. Not NATO, I'm sorry. United Nations peacekeepers. Maybe. The only thing is, I would want to make sure that the UN peacekeepers inside Ukraine are from Western countries and not just Africa. Because if a bunch of African United Nations peacekeepers are killed, that is not going to inspire NATO to go to war to defend Ukraine. It's not, right? And what I worry about is even if you had Western military, the Western contribution to the United Nations, right? So let's pretend you've got American, or I don't even know if the Americans contribute to the UN in that regard, but if you've got Americans or you've got Germans or whatever, I still think it gives you too much of an opportunity for the Western countries to say, well, that wasn't really an attack on NATO. That wasn't an attack on America. That was an American who died, right? Think about the deaths that we have had with people who have volunteered from our countries fighting in Ukraine, right? They've died. Americans died. I'm trying to think who else have died from a couple other I keep thinking of the recent prisoner exchanges, Canadians, but think of other countries that people have died. We didn't go to war because an American who volunteered to fight in Ukraine died. That's not a reason for America to go to war. Brits, okay, 2 Brits died. That's not a reason for Britain didn't go to war. If 2 British NATO soldiers were killed by the Russians on purpose, that would be an act of war against NATO. I think you've got to have NATO troops on the ground. I really do. I really do. And again, whether NATO would agree to it, Canadian peacekeepers, but the same thing. Canada didn't go to war, right? It's not like you're at war over it. You're not. But I think we'd have to have NATO troops on the ground. Dutch soldiers too. Okay, we got everybody. Okay. Daniel. That's it. The game of chicken. Oh, the game of chicken is escalate to de-escalate. Okay. Because from Cuba, the Russians got concessions. They did actually. American nukes out of Turkey, which is actually very true. It happened like 6 months later, and we kind of didn't talk about it, but the Russians did get something out of it. Okay, that is considered escalate to de-escalate. Okay. All right. Thanks, Daniel. Okay, this was interesting. So Mr. White Vizsla says, why would the Polish government summon the Russian ambassador hours after it happened if NATO was sure it was a Ukrainian missile? Again, really good question. Poland made clear yesterday, okay? Which kind of shirt? You mean another Ukrainian shirt, Mustard? Colonel Mustard? Sorry, but I'm real curious because saying, could you auction a shirt? You mean another Ukrainian military shirt or what? I hope you don't mean like the shirt I'm wearing. That would be creepy. Let me know what you mean, if that's what you mean. Oh, and we've got 2 more. Actually, we've got more bracelets coming too. I'll put up another. I will put up. Sorry, what we are talking about, just so folks know, I've got a Discord, and in my Discord community, we auction things off. And lately, we've been auctioning off things from Ukraine, and actually, we've been pretty much only auctioning off things from Ukraine, and we've been splitting the proceeds 50% to support my work doing this, because I've been doing this full time, and no one is no one's paying for it. You guys are supporting me, but no outside group is helping support me. And 50% of it has been going to support humanitarian work in Ukraine. So I do have another of the Azov style bracelets that we will auction off. And I've got other Ukrainian military shirts. I've got the combat shirts that Zelensky wears that are very cool. And they're literally the green combat shirts that he wears. We found the company that makes them. We found the exact design he buys and have bought a number of them, and we're auctioning them off. So I'll put, this is my full-time job. Yeah, I decided to do this full-time. I mean, I've always done social media stuff and everything else. And when the war hit, I wanted to just to go full time on Ukraine, doing the news updates and see if I could pull it off. And it's still not 100%. It's still at a bit of a loss, but it's been getting better and better because you guys have been contributing more, which has been great. So thank you. But yeah, I'll put some stuff up tomorrow. Because we just finished a bunch of the auctions. I'll put more. You don't get my jacket. This is a Goodwill. This is a Goodwill. My mom was saying, she goes, I like your jacket. This was my Goodwill buy. I think I paid $3 for this jacket. Thank you, Purnell. But you do not get my jacket. You do not get my jacket. This is my jacket. What else we got here? Actually, you know what I'll do? Let me go to TikTok and look in the TikTok Q&A and see if any of you guys put questions in there. Let's do that. TikTok. Got about 5 more minutes, maybe 10. We'll see how it goes. Here is this. Here we go. Q&A. Why would NATO? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me finish real quick though. So Wiesla was saying, when we got distracted by the discussion of the shirts, Wiesla was saying, why were the Poles so definitive about the fact that it seemed like the Russians had attacked? Okay, the Poles called in the Russian ambassador and yelled at him in Poland. They put out a statement that sure sounded like they were blaming Russia, even though they were being a little careful. And then as the evening went on, it sounded like they kind of backed away. Biden started backing away. Everyone started backing away. I'm not quite sure why the Poles seemed pretty convinced at the beginning and then backed away. Now, unless they made a mistake, but why would they just assume? Poland knows from the beginning, okay? I mean, we talked about it yesterday. From the beginning, it was possible that this was a Ukrainian rocket. You and I knew this, right? Thank you, Alex, for that. I mean, right? Every one of you out there knew that it could be Russia, it could be Ukraine. And it could be Russia and Ukraine. It could have been a Russian rocket. Imagine a Russian rocket coming, the Ukrainians intercepting it, and then both fall down, right? So it could have been both. But we all knew that. So why at the beginning weren't the Poles more careful about saying, this is very serious, we're going to investigate, but demanding the Russian... It still feels to me like I'm not getting the full story. That's what's bothering me. Now, actually, what I didn't say earlier, and I could have said this, what I didn't say earlier was, and I'm not convinced this is true, but some people are worried that NATO might be trying to de-escalate. In other words, Russia did escalate. Thank you, Jingle. Have a good night. That Russia did escalate. It was Russia's missile that hit Poland, and that NATO, in order to basically de-escalate, is saying, no, it wasn't Russia. Now, I don't believe it. I just don't believe it because, first of all, NATO isn't going to blame Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine's our ally. Ukraine's the government we're helping. We could make up another lie, but we're not going to make up a lie and say it was the Ukrainians, But who knows? I still find, like I said, there's something going on here. We're not getting the full story, bottom line, and it's bothering me. Do make sure to follow. We got a couple more minutes of questions here. Do make sure to follow me on TikTok. I was going to say TikTok. I always want to call you guys TikTok, and follow me on YouTube and all the other social media so we can stay in touch. I will be doing videos, obviously updating you guys on stuff. And then, as I said, every night, we will, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, we'll be doing these. Thank you, Smiling. Why would NATO not use this bombing of Poland to threaten Russia about infrastructure attacks, threaten to give better HIMARS rockets? Well, I mean, the problem. Okay, that's a very good question. I can't think of any situation where the Russians did something and NATO turned around and said, okay, that's it. That was horrific what you did. To punish you, we're going to give Ukraine a weapon that we weren't going to give them previously, right? For example, Ukraine wants longer range rockets for the HIMARS. We have been saying no. Bucha, right? The Bucha massacre. That was way back at the beginning of the war. We found out about it at the end of March, early April. That was the city that was liberated, and small town that was liberated, and the Russians just killed hundreds of people, and the people were dead in the streets. It was a horrible story, and those horrible pictures that came out of it, right? We didn't turn around from Bucha and say, okay, you committed a war crime. We are going to provide more of this missile or a different kind of missile or a different kind of plane or something. I have not found anything, and I wish we would, because I think we've got to provide, incentives for the Russians to perhaps act better. But I think what's going on is the town of Bucha. The town of Bucha isn't that small? Okay, I thought it was more of a smaller town. But we have been, I think, too afraid of escalating. So that the idea is when the Russians do something horrible, we don't respond by giving Ukraine, saying, well, now we're going to give Ukraine better weapons because of you doing this, Russia, because then we're afraid Russia's going to go, aha, and then we're going to go, aha, and Russia's going to go, aha. I think it's wrong of us. I think it's the wrong way to be looking at all of this, but I think that's why you're not seeing, like you said, NATO responding by going, you know what? Now, we are seeing NATO respond by saying, even if it was Ukraine, it's Russia's fault. Russia started this war. Russia has been intentionally hitting targets next to Poland. And if anything, as somebody said today that I was quoting, it might even, actually it was the Polish prime minister who said this, Russia might have even done this on purpose. They intentionally shot a missile near Poland, knowing that at some point a Ukrainian missile might go off and hit Poland and cause a crisis. But it's not enough to just say it. You've got to do something about it. I do look at Facebook. I get Facebook comments here, but they scroll by along with everything else. Sorry. People were saying I'm not looking at Facebook. I actually do get the Facebook comments using the program I've got here. But hold on. Actually, you know what? Patrick. Patrick had written a very big comment. Hold on. Disagreeing, but that's okay. I will read Patrick's comment here. I had actually saved that, Patrick. Because I saw that you'd written a long comment and I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's interesting from Facebook. So I'm glad you guys said that. Patrick was responding to the idea of having NATO forces in Ukraine as peacekeepers. What a load of, I'll say garbage, because I don't want to get TikTok, the TikTok morality police mad at me. When the Ukrainian missile landed in Poland, Western leaders couldn't get to the microphone fast enough to say that it wasn't a Russian missile. America's politicians talk tough when they're playing to the masses, but the thought of Russian missiles coming down on Washington, D.C. and other locations in America due to their rhetoric, well, that might be harder to explain to their voters. I would argue that you're right and wrong, Patrick. And what I mean is you are correct that that's what they're afraid of, and I think they're wrong to be afraid of it. Russian missiles are not going to come down on Washington, D.C., because then our missiles are going to come down on Russia and it'll be the end of the world. And the Russians know it. There's never going to be American missiles coming down on Russia or Russian missiles coming down on us. But what's happened is I think our government is way too afraid of, oh my God, what will crazy Vladimir Putin do? Would Putin use nukes? And we're letting him run the show. And that basically Ukraine could win this if we'd given them the right weapons, but we're not, we're not. Let me just look, any last minute things. People are saying that there's something on CNN. Is there something interesting on CNN or no? I could put it on to see, but what would you do different if you were Zelensky or Biden? Oh my God. I mean, the problem there becomes regarding what? Okay. Let's say Biden. Okay. It is riskier, but I am much more of a fan. Biden is much more of a quiet diplomacy fan, and that's fine. I do not oppose quiet diplomacy. I think when dealing with someone like the Russians, you have to show strength. And if you don't show strength, you're showing weakness. Quick little aside. Franny McDowell, happy birthday. Put it on the screen. Give Franny little birthday wishes, everybody out there. It's Franny McDowell. Happy birthday. But I think with the Russians, you've got to show strength or they're going to just Putin's famous for this. Putin likes to escalate. Putin just likes to go more, and especially when he sees you're being weak, he goes more and more and more. And he goes right harder and harder and harder, hoping that you're going to back down. And frankly, and you're getting lots of happy birthdays on TikTok, Franny, just so you know. Just so you know, there's lots of them on TikTok right now. But we have talked so many times about being afraid of what Vladimir Putin will do, that if I were Putin, I'd be going, this is great. If I were Putin, I would be saying, you know what? Biden keeps saying how afraid he is that I'm going to use nukes. Let's make it look like I'm going to use nukes. I mean, let's not go to the edge, right? You don't want to go to the edge where literally it looks like you're using them. Not that. But let's talk about it more. Let's even make some movement behind the scenes. Let's just convince Biden that, oh boy, if those Ukrainians keep winning, it's game over, right? I'm so irrational. I'm so crazy that I would do it. That's what happens. So that I would do that differently than Biden has. Otherwise, thank you, K9. Otherwise, I do think Biden has done an amazing job of marshaling the international community. I'm going to put it on CNN because people keep saying put on CNN. We'll see if anything's on. He's done an amazing job with that, and that's been great. He's very good. Frederick Plotgild. U.S. and NATO, Russia bears ultimate responsibility.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah,
in Moscow tonight. So now let's go to that rural Polish village.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like there's anything new. There's nothing new. Yeah, no. Look up RT News. Why would you look up RT News? RT News is the Russian propaganda network that literally exists to lie to people and spread the Kremlin's propaganda. Nathan, I mean, first of all, there are not always two sides to every story. There aren't. But also, you would never go to RT. I mean, my God. No. You want to find out what's going on? You read a lot of different news sources from around the world, and you get your information from everywhere. That's never a bad thing, but you don't turn to bad sources. This was somebody on TikTok saying this. No, RT is literally a propaganda network. CNN is one of the best news outlets in the world. It's not the same as RT for America. Not even close. I know CNN reporters. CNN is an amazing news network. And frankly, I would say all of you know that. Even the guy saying it knows it. Now, my guess is you're probably Republican, because Republicans, unfortunately, had to attack CNN because, CNN was being outspoken and holding not just Trump responsible, but, look, Republican parties had some issues. And they basically realized that they had to. I mean, I've got a whole theory on this. I'd rather not get into the partisan politics issue tonight about Republicans, but Republicans, unfortunately, learned early on that if they were going to lie to their voters, they had to delegitimize the media in order to basically protect their voters from the truth, right? If you think CNN lies, then your voters won't believe the truth when it comes on CNN. And this is what Trump has done effectively, but it's also what Republicans have done for years. CNN is a fabulous news network. Absolutely. Elise, Russia compliments the U.S. reaction. Russia compliments the U.S. reaction. Then Lavrov doesn't protest the G20 condemnation. Behind the scenes handling of the missile incident. Okay, that was too much shorthand, Elise. So I'm guessing Russia complimented the U.S. for holding back or something. I don't know. And then Lavrov doesn't protest the G20 condemnation. Yeah, maybe there's something. I don't know. Maybe there was something that happened. Maybe something did happen behind the scenes. I don't know. No, you're not a windbag. If anything, you had too few words. I needed more words. Let me see. It's possible. I mean, high as ASCII box is saying, here's how it is. Poland was sacrificed to appease dictators before. Seems like it's being appeased again. Somehow I remember a different reaction from U.S. after 9/11 than after Malaysian airplane or the attack on Poland. NATO responded with conclusions quicker than Poland had a chance to react. I just don't know. I mean, Duda himself has put out, the president of Poland, some pretty definitive statements about this, basically saying it looks like it's not Russia. Earlier, Duda had said, he's seen no evidence at all that it was Russia. Thank you, Tony. You know, well, the thing, I mean, I don't want to get into the whole. I see your comment, Alec. I'll put it up for people to read on YouTube, but I don't want to get into the whole back and forth on that. Well, that's a whole other question, Sean. Yeah, let's not get into all of that right now. Also, because I'm gonna wrap up. Let me do a quick recap of the news. Oh, check Q&A. Okay, I'll do a quick Q&A look. Now, the only problem in the TikTok Q&As, just so you know, is it doesn't really show me who wrote the questions unless I click each question and go through. So TikTok can be a bit of a pain this way. Let me see here. Well, that was my question. If this is Matthew was saying, if Ukraine, he's saying short range missiles, if Ukraine and the fighting is way in the south, how could it be Ukraine's missiles? Well, no, the problem is, and let me show you really quick, and then I'm going to summarize the news and we'll be done because it's already 10 after. So I'm kind of going over. At one point months ago, I lost my voice because I was doing too many of these. So I'm trying to be more careful. Let me show you really quick. I went online today and I pulled up the Polish town where the missile struck. And then I drew 120 mile radius out. Okay. So 120 miles each way using a nice little map that I've got to see, because that is in principle the maximum distance that the S-300 can go, that this rocket that they found can go. So this red circle shows everywhere in principle that rocket could have taken off from. If you look at it very closely, you will see that it's Ukraine, Poland, Slovakia, and Belarus. Now, let's assume it didn't come from Poland. Let's assume it didn't come from Slovakia. The question is Ukraine or Belarus. Okay, you guys can see too. It's hard to tell exactly, but there is actually you can just see there's a chunk of Belarus sticking down there. Okay, now looking at the trajectory, supposedly Biden mentioned the trajectory, the angle it was coming at. The trajectory. Why am I not able to say the word trajectory today? The trajectory would have to be coming down south, right, from north to south if it was coming from Belarus, if it were coming from Belarus. Otherwise, it would be coming somewhere, somewhere within this 180 degrees if it were coming from Ukraine. So, any case. All right, let me do a quick summary of the news. What I like to do at the end of the show for anybody who's new is I simply tick off the news stories that I talked about, the topics, just to give you a quick summary. And that way, at least if you miss something, you kind of get the gist of what we talked about. Okay, I'll do a quickie and then we'll go. Just to remind folks, before you sign off, please do follow me on TikTok. Please do subscribe on YouTube and elsewhere. And if you want to check out afterwards, go to aravosis.com. Actually, on TikTok, it's easy. Just go to my profile. The link in my profile takes you to my link tree, and it's my Discord, our store that has lots of cool Ukrainian-themed stuff. My Patreon, if you want to support my work and go, donate there. But my link tree, if you want to see my background about politics and foreign affairs. And for the rest of you, just go to aravosis.com. You'll find the link there. Oh, okay. Donovan says he got ticked off. Doesn't know why. Donovan, why don't you write out before I give the summary, write out what your TikTok screen name is, the actual account name, and I can have one of the TikTok folks put you back in. That happens sometimes. We get so many of the bad guys coming on TikTok that it's really hard for the moderators to get people and not the fun and get the wrong person. I will say the funniest story that happened early on with the war was I was having to moderate because I was just starting doing this and I didn't have enough people that volunteered. People were volunteering, but I didn't know who they were. Right. So I was having to moderate myself. And one woman who was moderating for me on YouTube, I go to block one of the trolls and I blocked her instead. She was my top moderator and I couldn't figure out how to unblock her. So the troll was still there and the woman I needed to block the troll was banned. And it was very funny in retrospect, but it wasn't that funny at the time. So it can be difficult sometimes Did I block you once too, Roshan? I mean, I wouldn't have done it on purpose, but that's funny. Yeah, if one of the mods can just set him free, that's his name. You guys can all see on YouTube, so one of you can do it on TikTok, I'm assuming. Yep. The YouTube folks, one of you is going back and forth to do it. It's Donovan Platt Sr. So DONOVANPLATTSR. Okay, hopefully one of you is doing that. Okay, thank you. And I did make a troll a mod once too. That was the other thing. I made a troll a moderator. I hit the wrong thing, and it was before the troll I realized what I did, and I went, "Oh my god! I just made like this Russian bot a moderator of my forum." Excuse me. All right. So the stories I talked about today. U.S. and NATO say the missiles likely came from Ukraine. The polls say it likely came from Ukraine. President Zelensky says there is no doubt that it was not a missile from Ukraine. I showed you guys, went through the range of the missile, and looking at the range, it looks like the missile could only go from Ukraine or Belarus. Now, somebody's asking, is Visegrad 24 a reliable source? I know of them and I follow them, but I'm not sure. One of the things that I found is, in terms of, and this is actually for all of you guys, but in terms of finding credible sources online, you are always in worse shape the further away you get from a very large media outlet. And this, again, is why some people want you to believe that the big media outlets can't be trusted, because they're the only people you really can trust. Okay. When an outlet gets smaller, for example, I have the worst allergies, exactly. And they just go during the show, they always start to go crazy on me. And I don't know why. A small outlet doesn't have the money to get the story right if it's what's going on in Poland. Right? It's got to be a bigger outlet. I do follow a lot of these guys on Twitter. I'm not sure. I will say that it is always, you always want to know. Well, Fox News is its own problem. Fox News has the money. Fox News has the money to get the story right. Yes. Fox News, unfortunately, its editorial policy from the top is to help Republicans. I mean, that's the editorial policy, and Fox News' own people. Mike Wallace left Fox News because he said he could no longer stay there because of what was going on Fox News, right? I mean, that you don't see. No one has left CNN saying I was the top anchor at CNN and I left because CNN was, did I say Mike Wallace? I'm sorry, Chris Wallace. You can tell how old I am that I said Mike Wallace. Chris Wallace, Mike Wallace's son. But Fox News, Fox News has the money to get the story right. Yes. If they were not a partisan outlet, they would be good. But otherwise, I will go around and big news can still get it wrong, but I will go and check CNN. I'll go and check the New York Times. I'll check the Washington Post. Obviously any of the big, certainly the BBC. I get a little worried about Sky News, though Sky News does seem to have a lot of interesting Ukraine news. I was looking at them today. They got a lot of good Ukraine news. Associated Press, very good. Just announced the Republicans won the House. Yeah, not surprising because we knew the Republicans were going to get it anyway. But yeah, but they're not all partisan outlets. That's the thing. They're not. You've got. I mean, I know these guys, a lot of these reporters, they try to get the truth. The Fox News types do not try to get the truth. They're literally working for the Republican Party. Literally. It's not trying to get the truth. And by the way, when they got the truth, they got fired. One of the guys, do you remember when Trump got upset because Fox News during the 2020 election called Arizona for Reuters is good. Yes. Called Arizona for Biden. And Trump got upset, called Fox News, yelled at them. Fox checked behind the scenes and they had their data nerd, this guy, he's a data guy and he was the head of their team. All the big news like this, the big TV news, they've got a whole team of data people that are going through the data and they're running the math and all this kind of stuff, right? Well, Trump got the guy fired. Fox fired him. Fox fired the guy who was in charge of calling Arizona because Trump got upset that they called Arizona. Because remember, Trump said Arizona was stolen or whatever. Fox didn't retract Arizona. They didn't say Trump didn't, that they didn't say, oh, we were wrong, Biden never won. But they fired the guy because the guy did the math and told Fox and said, Biden won. And he did. That's the problem with Fox News. You know, other networks can get the story wrong. Now, MSNBC, different story. MSNBC clearly leans left, and I think it's a mistake that they do with MSNBC. I do. I think, you know, their shows at night are frankly too far left because it hurts their credibility, I think. Because all their shows is left on MSNBC. It hurts their credibility. So I even if I like some of the people, like I like Joe Scarborough, but you know, he was a far right Republican, but now it's a left wing show, which is fine. But CNN doesn't do that. Now, CNN, most of their people are critical of Donald Trump, but guess what? Anybody who loves democracy is critical of Donald Trump. So that doesn't make you partisan. All right, enough of that, enough of this. Let me finish with the news and then we're going to go. All right. So the Ukrainians say there was no doubt that the missile was not from Ukraine. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, we found out America's top general, tried to reach out to his Russian, I was going to say Soviet, I'm getting tired, his Russian counterpart on Tuesday in the middle of the crisis, and the Russian wouldn't talk to him, which was very dangerous. President Zelensky says that Western countries have said that they're getting signals that the Russians want to negotiate. General Milley, our top general, also said that he felt the probability of Ukrainian military victory was low, but a political victory was possible. He thinks Ukraine could get a lot of its land back, thank you, Messi, by negotiating with the Russians. And I said, I'm curious where he got that from, because Milley wouldn't just say that. First of all, he's a general. Why would a general be talking about negotiations unless he knew something and was told he could talk about it or was told to talk about it? But there was something going on there. The Czech Republic is going to train up to 4,000 Ukrainian troops in 2023. And the Red Cross, we said, is giving $2.7 million to liberated Ukrainians, which comes down to $33 or 33 euros a person, which is horrific. So, all right. I'm going to go, guys. As I said, I had my follow-up to my little nose thing that that could be why the nose is itching too. I had to have that nose procedure again, not a nose job, but they went and checked it out today and it hurt like hell. And it gave me the worst migraine all day. So I think I'm going to eat a little chocolate, and I just can't do Discord. I've got a migraine. Normally I would go do Discord because I haven't gone all week because we've had so much going on, but literally I took a couple prescription pills I've got and I'm feeling better, but I still am like migraine screaming to come back. So I got to skip it tonight. And what I'll do is I will put up some more. Actually, Donovan, you're giving a couple different ways here of how you're writing it. Is that he's giving a different way now? Sorry. Did the mods actually, before I hang up, did the mods ever figure out how to get Donovan unbanned? I'll look really well. I turned the lights. I'm going to do it after this. I've got to have the ring light on for the computer, for the YouTube. Otherwise I would have the ring light down and then it would be nice. But let me see just real quick. Did Donovan get back? No Discord. Yeah, I can't, not with my headache. I just want to see if Donovan got put back. Otherwise I will as well look on my TikTok to see. Yeah, thank you, moderators, as always. Thank you for the gifts, guys, as always. You've all been very generous, as always, and I really appreciate it. Oh, you did get him. Oh, okay, Cindy just got it. Well, I think Manda went the first time, but he may have written it wrong. Cindy says she just did it, Donovan, so you should be good, okay? Okay. Hopefully. Okay, Manda did it too. Okay, you're good. You're good. All right. If there's still a problem tomorrow, let me know, but the mods say they fixed it, so you should be fine. Yeah, sorry about that. Hot tea and lemon. I think maybe I will do that tonight. Does it help for migraines? Oh, man. All right. I'm going to go, guys. Thank you for the last little flowers there, dear Benji. And I will see you guys tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern time US, and we will talk more about the latest news in the next 24 hours from Ukraine. Okay. All right. Bye, guys. Thank you. Brr. Burp. Burp, 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 burp. Hang on. Oops. There we go. All right. Boom.